Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Blue is the New White podcast. Today, we have another fellow podcaster on the show, one with a similar mission to mine, who has interviewed almost as many guests as I have. Keith Williams of Skill Stadium joins us today to talk all about his mission and what he's trying to accomplish in this space. I could not have asked for a better advocate with another podcast platform to make their way into this space and help us move these industries forward. Keith shares with us today his true desire to inform people about these wonderful industries and enable the success of many. Even though he hasn't worked in the skilled trades himself, he's been able to cascade several hours of wildly valuable information by being the most honest version of himself, being humble in his conversations, and being willing to be a student for each one of his guests. If you have not checked out his show, be sure to add it to your playlist right now. And don't forget to subscribe to this channel and on our website at blueisthenewwhite.com to receive all the latest updates. As always, this show's not monetized and we don't run ads. We rely strictly on the word of mouth from our listeners to further the mission. So if you enjoy this episode, please do me a favor. Take a second to rate it, review it, and share it with your friends. The future generations of tradespeople depend on it. They depend on you. So thank you again and enjoy this episode of the Blue is the New White podcast with Keith Williams. Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Blue is the New White podcast. I have got an awesome guest for you today. We've actually shared some guests in the past, another fellow podcaster, somebody you probably know. If you follow the Blue is the New White podcast, you certainly follow Skill Stadium. Please welcome to the show, Mr. Keith Williams. Keith, thanks for coming on, man.
My pleasure, Josh. I'm excited about this. Huge fan of what you do, and I've been watching you and learning from you too, I might add.
Oh, thank you, man. You're going to give me a big head over here. But no, and likewise. I love the way that you structure your show. And like I said, I know we've shared a lot of guests in the past, which is really great because we can get all alternate perspectives, questions that I didn't ask. I see you asking, questions that you don't ask. I can have the opportunity to ask. It's really a really good dynamic, I think, that our shows have on the platforms that we share.
Definitely.
So anyway, for those who don't know you, Keith, I kind of just want to start off with your story,
Sure.
kind of who you are and, how you got to where you are today.
Sure. Well, Josh, I grew up in Montreal, Quebec, Canada. I actually have dual citizenship and moved down to Atlanta in the late 90s. My background has been in terms of work. I've worked primarily in the sales industry, everywhere from retail sales, copier sales, then on to technology sales. Now, I really got the entrepreneurial bug and the desire to start my own business when I started working for small companies and just watching what they were doing and seeing, wow, I can do this. And, one of the things when you have a sales background, and we all know as a business, if you don't have sales, you don't have a business. If that's your expertise, you do feel confident in starting a business. You do realize as you started, it's not just that. It's a little bit more to that, but as I know you're aware. So, yeah. So for me, the reason why I decided to start this business is I felt like the employment, how people get hired, employees and employers, is a broken system. This send a resume out and, I think that's antiquated. There's a better way to do it. I think, in talking to a lot of business owners as I was prepping this business, one of the things that I was a challenge is that, and I've done this too as a hiring manager, is what you see on paper isn't always what walks in the door. You can write anything on a resume. It doesn't mean that it's true. It doesn't mean it's true. You have stories I'm sure you can tell.
I'm sure we've all been there, my friend. I'm sure. It says here that you're 6'5", but you look about 5'6", but
yes. We've seen that, definitely. So what makes my platform a little different is that the job seeker creates a 30-second elevator pitch on video. It's very hard to fake that. you've got to be able to state who you are, what you do. You can also do audio, but you have to be able to speak. And I think we can all agree, if you're going to go for any job, you have to be able to say who you are, what you do, what makes you good at what you do. Elevator pitch. It's the most basic thing to get hired or considered for any job. The other thing about the platform is it also gives you the option of doing a 1-minute video, which I call proof of expertise. If you're a plumber, you can do a minute video sharing something or demonstrating your skill set. That's proof. You have a show me economy. The sooner I can find out that you can do the work, the sooner we can move closer to getting you hired on board if you fit into the culture of the company. But if you don't have the basics to do the job, we can't consider you to be hired. And that's the difference with the platform. So that's where I see the value of the platform. That's why I started. I also feel like we have a skills gap. We don't have, say, a platform like a LinkedIn dedicated strictly for the skill trades. And that's kind of the vision that I have as I'm building Skill Stadium. So that's kind of my...
So what led you to focus on that niche, on the skilled trades in general? I see a lot of, mechanical, electrical, plumbing, that kind of, those kind of trades on your podcast. What led you to this industry?
Sure. What led me to this industry was that I got sick and tired of waiting for so long to get a plumber. More importantly, I felt like the skilled trades offers a better return on your investment. If I'm giving somebody advice, I want to give people advice on something where they can actually get a job that pays them a good wage, that has a good return on investment. And I saw that there are a lot of young people who are not necessarily taking the college path. And I felt like this is a good path for us to focus on because, one, you can get somebody an employment opportunity making a living wage in less than 2 years with a minimal investment. And I said, wow, that's a problem. And that's a great problem to tackle. And I knew that was a problem that has to get solved. So I believe that you don't have a business unless you have a problem that you can solve. And I felt like, okay, this is something we could solve. I did learn as I was just getting started, one of the biggest obstacles was I did not work in skilled trades. So that did provide a bit of a challenge, particularly as I was creating content. But what I found is that, I'll give you an example. I was on a Facebook group page and I was sharing a post about nationally what plumbers make. I forget what it was. And this individual said, that's not true. I work as a plumber. I said, well, hey, look, it's national. It's not, I know it might be different where you are. He goes, no, I know what the salaries are everywhere. I said, really? I said, maybe you should come on and talk to me and maybe we can do an interview and I can learn from you. And he just dropped off, right? And so what I learned is that if you embrace people, I guess you could say kill them with kindness. Sometimes people just want a conflict. He was just trying to pick a fight. He wanted attention.
Social media is good for that. That's for sure.
Yeah. But I found that as I reached out to people were willing to talk to me about the trades as time went on. And particularly as I did the podcast, I really admit I'm not a tradesperson, but I want to guide our young people to the trades. And in order to do that, you have to have tradespeople talking about the trades. If you don't, then it's just me saying, hey, I read online that tradespeople do this and do that. Well, they can get that same information. Why would I do that? So that's why I have to go out and do these podcasts, do these day in the life interviews and say, hey, talk to Josh, talk to Shannon, talk to this person who I've interviewed. They're telling the real deal. They're going to tell it like it is. Because that's what I tell people. If they're coming on the podcast, don't sugarcoat it. If you make $25 an hour, and even though Google says it's 50, say you make 25, tell the truth.
Yeah, that's right.
That's time. Give people what's really going on in the industry. Tell them the good, the bad, the ugly.
Yeah, that's right. And just the last guest that I had on the show, his episode hasn't even aired yet. It'll air on Friday. But one of his big things was be the most honest version of yourself, right? Yes. And just in the last few sentences that you spoke just now, I mean, I see that the value in it exactly from your perspective as well. Like when you're saying, hey, I've never worked in the trades, but I want to be a contributor to these industries, help me do that. Yes. That's going to resonate with people way more than you pretending like you know more than you do, right? And the same thing with the tradespeople that you're talking about. You know, if the national average is $50 an hour for something, but you make 25, come on the show, tell me that you make 25. You know,
Yes.
maybe it's a market issue, maybe it's a training issue, maybe it's a demographic issue, maybe it, you know, who knows? But be the most honest version of yourself so we can all take these industries and lift them up.
Yes. Yeah, and I also think that people are going to find out, and you're going to ruin your credibility if you're sitting there and stating, hey, you know, according to BLS, I mean, I interviewed Greg Crompton. He's straight out of Crompton.
Mm-hmm.
He's an HVAC guy. He's an older gentleman.
Yep.
And he started telling me, yeah, BLS is not accurate on what people make. And I was like, oh, but you can't, I wouldn't know that unless I spoke to him. He's in the industry. So I believe him.
Yep.
Why would, you know, he's done it for 20 something years. Why would he lie about that? You know? So that's where I see the relevance of interviewing people like him, because now people can say, oh, wait a minute. He's done this for 20 plus years. I believe him, rather than looking at what's on Google or BLS. There's no substitute for experience.
Absolutely, 100%. And a lot of times, as you know, Keith, you know, these statistics, you know, they're put together by people that aren't in the industry, right? And so they're going off what they see on paper, which isn't always accurate. And it does a disservice to those in the industry and those who want to be in the industry, whether it's high or low, because it may just not be as accurate as it needs to be. I mean, in order for kids and students and people who want career changes, anybody that's looking to get into the industry, they need all the information, the good, the bad, and the ugly, you know, as you would say, so they can make an educated decision on whether or not this is the career path they want to go. You know, so I think that's super important, and a really good way to get the honest information out into the world, you know, from the horse's mouth, if you will, right?
Yeah. Josh, I'll tell you another story. I was at a HVAC school about a year and a half, 2 years ago, and they were having industry people come in, and they were doing a presentation. The people at the school that they give to, they had government people there who support the trades. And so they were doing a presentation. They were talking about, you know, here's our education programs. Here's what we're learning from you guys in the industry. Here's what the students make when they get out. And the guys in the industry said, no, that's out of date. These salaries have gone up. He said, oh, good. But you see how the schools were even making sure that they had their data up to date, because they're trying to get students in their school. So they've got to give students the real deal information. So they partner with those companies, those HVAC companies, and they adjust their training programs based on what those people are telling them. So they're listening to those people. And so now they're updating all their marketing information, saying, okay, it's not 25. I mean, I'm making this up, right? I'm not saying it's actually 25. They were saying it was 25. They corrected them, said now it's 30. So now they're changing the marketing material. So they're giving students some real world advice that they just heard from the people who are hired. I mean, and those are the people that I go and interview. So now when I interview that educating real world information. And that's one of the things I try and do. I make sure, I always tell people, you have to tell it like it is. You're coming on the show, you know, you got to tell the truth, like you said.
That's right. No, absolutely. And you know, for the listeners out there, think about what Keith just said. You know, that even some of these schools have been out of date, you know, with some of the wages that these students are making when they come out into the workforce. What does that tell you about the speed in which these industries are actually growing? Right? When schools like that, I mean, they're small, right? We're not talking about big universities with huge boards that the curriculums have to work their way through in order to even get implemented. We're talking about smaller trade schools, vocational schools that are very well connected in the community. Even they don't always have the up-to-date information, which should tell you how fast these industries are moving, right? And that's why this is so important, right? The things that I talk about, things that you talk about, because we have a growing industry with a dying profession, right? Yes. And that just doesn't work. That doesn't work. And so I mean, I guess one of the most important questions, you know, is how do we actually connect with students, right, and educate them on the value that these careers actually bring, what they can realistically expect in the form of success when they enter into one of these careers. How do we do that?
I think first and foremost, you have to the school. Uh, I know that some of the schools have career days, and I volunteered on those career days. And I think what gets people's attention, I've found this too when I posted these things in social media, is what they're getting paid. Because, young people, when they're just getting started, they are concerned about how much money they're going to make. It comes up fairly quickly. It doesn't, that question to pop up. So I think you have to pay attention to what's important to them. Then I would also say, what's it going to be like to do the work? So what's a day in their life like? So if, let's say there's somebody who doesn't like, I don't know, they don't like working in confined places. Let's say the job has them working in confined places. They might want to know that before they decide to do that type of work, right? So I think the biggest thing that we can do is just have people who are in the trades get into schools, because the average student is not going to have access to these tradespeople. I didn't know anything about food and equipment, and I've been working on this platform and working in this industry now for a little bit of time, and I've met a lot of people. And imagine if I'm working in it and I don't know it. So the average person is not going to know about the food and equipment business. Look at linemen, right? Like we had the Hurricane Ian recently. A lot of people don't know what linemen do, but now as they're getting the power back on, I promise you, those people in Florida are going to have a very good idea of what they do. That's right. And that's hard work, right? So let's say you're afraid of heights. Well, you might not want to be a lineman. Maybe you want to be an auto technician, a plumber, right? But it's important for the students to know, here's what you're going to do, right? Here's what you made. Here's what you're going to do. And they got to make a decision. A lineman probably might make more money than, say, I don't know, the HVAC technician. Again, I'm not saying this is accurate, but let's say you don't like heights. Well, it might not be worth it to make the extra money to do something you don't like.
That's right.
So maybe you do something that, that you're not afraid of, that pays you less. But all of them still pay a great living wage. Maybe it's a difference of whether you make $20 an hour or $25. I'd rather do $20 an hour doing something I enjoy than $25 an hour doing something that terrifies me.
That's exactly right. I'm glad you brought that up, because we talk a lot on this show about, the skilled trades being able to provide you success in however you define it, right? So it's your definition of success. It's not one size fits all, right? And essentially that's exactly what you're saying. So I have a question with the schools, because, I have this conversation a lot. For those who listen to the show, they know that we talk about schooling a lot and how to reach kids and this and that. In your opinion, because I know that you're heavy into this now, you've got kids at all different grade levels. You've got the trade schools who've already graduated high school. You've got the high schoolers. You've got the middle schoolers. You've got the elementary schoolers. How early do we have to get to these kids in order to make the impression that we want to make? Is it the earlier the better? Is it early? Is that right?
Yeah, I think as early as elementary. I was talking to my kids. I have a middle schooler and a high schooler, but I was talking to them in elementary about the things that they like to enjoy. Doesn't mean they've got to make a decision. It just means you got to pay attention to, what they like and enjoy, and just expose them to it. And then they'll figure it out as time goes, but you have to expose them to it. It's like we're seeing now a push for a lot of women to get into the skilled trades. So I saw this organization led by Julie Cassidy. She's a female plumber in New York, and she goes into the elementary schools and works with girls so that they can see examples of plumbers. That's going to have a tremendous impact. There are a lot of young ladies who are now going to become plumbers because of her. And that's great. It makes it enriches the industry, right? In an industry that has a shortage, why would you want to rule out a whole gender? That's stupid. That makes no sense. There's a lot of, especially if they're going to do the job just as well, maybe better, right? So, that's crazy. So we've got to expose them at a young age. So not just the women obviously, but the boys too. But I would say elementary school, and then start working it up appropriately in middle school. Maybe you're giving them a little bit more information now. Okay, here's what you have to study. Here's some of the things, So I would say start in elementary. You plant that seed, and then some kids like to play. Kids nowadays don't like to just always sit in the classroom and just sit. I hated it. I had to move around. I probably should have gone into skilled trades. I just couldn't sit still. So I relate to those young people who can't sit still. Got to move. They've got to do stuff with their hands. So that's another reason why I push the trades, because, like I said, everybody's not going to college, and we need these young people to make a good wage, and we need to close that skills gap. It's also fundamental for our economy. If you don't have these skilled trades infrastructure, we're in big trouble.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
You already know. So.
Absolutely. I agree with that 100%, and I like to throw out too, whenever we talk about colleges, where would we be if we didn't have people to build them?
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, at the end of the day, it's a perspective that we all need to have. Listen, there would be no schooling if it wasn't for tradespeople.
Yes.
So that's awesome. And as we get further along into the up and coming generations of tradespeople, right, and the younger ages, which I see a few of them out there, obviously they're entering into the trades at a much lower rate than they once were. And that's why the skills gap exists, right? We're seeing people retiring from the trades faster than people are entering into it. But for those who are entering into it, they're bringing with them another set of skills that I think that this industry greatly needs, right? And it's the ability to embrace video and technology, and the things that they're used to growing up doing on their cell phones and stuff like that. So how do we get the rest of the skilled tradespeople to embrace this? Is it a follow the leader kind of thing? And if it is, how do we get those younger people to develop into those leaders that can show the industry that this is actually beneficial?
That's a great question. Not an easy answer, because as people get older and they get more set in their ways, they don't always embrace change. I think it would have to be something that people change as a standard. Sort of like, there are people who are like, well, I used to fax my resume. I can remember mailing resumes in, but you know what? Can't do that anymore. Yeah. Nobody does that. That's not accepted. People would look at you crazy if you said, what's your fax number, right? So you've got to make it such a standard that everybody's got a smartphone, right? Everybody's got one. Everybody knows how to work the camera on the smartphone. So you've got to maybe make that a standard. And if you don't follow the standard, you're going to get left behind.
Yeah.
It's funny how people will change when their paycheck is dependent on them following those skills, right?
Yeah. So, totally. I don't mean to interrupt, but actually I want to, before I lose this point, you're absolutely right. So we use a technology here. I don't know if you've ever heard of it, maybe in your circles, XOI. So XOI Technologies makes a focus out of taking video on every service call, right? Yes. And they do a ton of cool stuff with it, right? But I'm not going to get into that here. But my point in saying is that it's a requirement for all my technicians, no matter what your age, to use the XOI technology on the service call. And I'll add too that because we've quote unquote changed this standard within our own organization, that the older generation has actually embraced it, because once they see the value, they see the value of it and where it can go, they really, I mean, hell, it helps them do their job. It helps them create visibility. It helps them explain things to customers that may not understand with just the words and the jargon that they use, so there's a lot of benefits to it. And to your point, of implementing it, and if your paycheck is dependent on it, will change the standard in the industry. We could leverage certain technologies that make it a focal point in order to infiltrate the rest of the industry.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and you think about it, there are older people who are on Facebook now, who are way older than those folks who are working. So if they can, embrace things like Facebook, as long as if it makes their lives easier, they're reluctant at first because people are reluctant to do things they don't know. The change is what, people who are older and like, I've always done it this way. Their reluctance is because they're afraid. They're scared.
Yeah.
Once they see that they can do it and it makes their lives easier, then they'll embrace it. Like I said, if their money's dependent on it, they'll do it. I remember I interviewed Chris Gutkis. I think I made an introduction to him. He owns Island Elevator. He was talking about the importance of learning. He said the older guys, if they don't learn the new equipment, because I'm limited on where I can send them. So if I've got old equipment and new equipment, and they haven't learned that new equipment, their usefulness to me starts to decrease. Their ability to, so I know where he was going. He's not going to say he's going to fire them, but he's saying they're no longer as valuable because I'm limited in how I can use them. So he's right. You got to learn the new stuff. It makes sense. Like that's part of your job. He's like, what happens when they start getting rid of all those older elevators and everything is modern? Because I can't keep you employed if you can't fix the elevators. Yeah. So you better embrace change. If you don't, you're out of a job. I mean, he doesn't have to say it. You should know, like, hey, you can't do any of the repairs. Well, how are we going to keep you employed? So I think it's the same thing for technology. If your standard to check in is to use your technology and they can't use that, how are they going to do their job?
Yeah. No, that's a valid point. With the changing in equipment and the technology infiltrating the equipment that we are out there to service, we really have no choice. And to your point and Chris's point, right, is that we say a lot that the opportunities in the trades is only dependent on how much you're willing to learn. And that doesn't just extend to the skills needed to fix the equipment. It extends to the tools necessary to fix the equipment. Right. And that's essentially what we're talking about. So, no, that's awesome information. And a good segue to my next question, because you had mentioned that even the older generation is on Facebook now using social media to, connect with family members and friends. And, it's fun to watch. So how do we use social media platforms to promote what we're talking about, to help, put the trades on a pedestal and put them in front of the people who can actually fill this gap that we're talking about?
I think one of the first things people need to do is see stories. I remember I toured a technical automotive school, and it's amazing. There are a lot of things that they told me about, but I'll tell you what I remembered when I visited that school. They had partnered with Mercedes, and Mercedes had all their cars there. The tools everything was computerized. So it was like they were coding, because if you look at the new cars, I don't have a Mercedes, I don't own that, but the car apparently is a big computer. And so they didn't have the tools that you would think of. They had like a lot of tools for diagnosis. It was all well organized, but there was a young man who finished the program, and they told me he was making $89K starting at Mercedes as a 19-year-old because of his ability to diagnose and code. And I remembered that jumped out, because I had to ask them again. I said, what? And they were like, yeah, 89K. And he probably maybe was on the high end, but that's phenomenal. And I don't think he was in the program more than 2 years. I mean, it just, so I think stories resonate with people. If you could start posting that on Reels, post that on TikTok, you start putting those stories out there. You also maybe do show what the possibilities, right? So, hey, if you take this path, here are the career options you have. Hey, you can start a business. You can go into the education side. Because I've heard people say, well, if you go on the trades, your body's going to get torn down and you're not going to be able to work for so long. I spoke to Joe that you introduced me to. He used to be a diver, and he told me now he's working as an apprentice liaison for a carpenter. Yep. So he's working more on the office side. So he told me he did the job for 20 plus years. So obviously he got a little older, right? I don't know how old he is, but he said he did it for a number of years, and it looked like he retired from that. But he made a shift onto the teaching side. So I say that just to say that there are other options. You can now go start a business, right? If you're starting a business, now you're not the one going and doing the physical work. you're hiring people to do the physical work, and they're going to respect you because you know what it's like to do the work. You know what the if they're telling you, hey, we can't do this, you're like, no, you can't. I've done that before. So you can now do your own business. So there's so many different paths. So I think if we let young people know that, as well as the money they can earn, that's the game changer. And once you start putting that in platforms in a creative manner, where you just got to get a bit creative. You don't sit there and say, well, you can make this and this. Maybe you make a fun video where you're showing people doing the work. You're talking about it. You have some nice graphics. You do that and you flood social media. And maybe you get somebody who's, I don't know, who's well known in the industry, maybe a Shannon Tomasco, Barbie the Welder. You have influencers talking about it. Now that's when we'll start to see a change. But it has to be, I think it has to be a constant barrage. I think people have to see the numbers. Once people see, numbers don't lie.
Yeah.
Numbers are the numbers. It's math, right? Like hey, I did this for 2 years. I made this. There's a clear path. And the numbers don't lie. And I think once, once parents see that return on investment, their attitudes will start to change. Because the parents are big influencers.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more with that statement. And, I think I might have even said it on your show, but I fully believe that consistency is the secret to success. So if we can all collectively, like you and I, talking to tradespeople, hopefully inspiring people to not only look at these industries, but maybe even, step into the spotlight and put themselves on a platform to share this kind of stuff. And so we're all collectively working consistently, to lift the industry up on social media. I don't think it'll have a choice but to move in that direction. Which kind of leads me, I've only got a couple more questions for you. I know I want to be respectful of your time, but you talk to a lot of people in these industries, and I do too. And we see these stories, a lot of them, online and social media. I'm curious, since you started this journey into the skilled trades, and you've talked to a lot of people in the industry, you've talked at schools, you've probably helped place, a lot of people in jobs. What do you admire most about the people in these industries, the skilled tradespeople? Is there a commonality among all of them from either a character standpoint, a value standpoint, something like that you've noticed and that you admire about the people working in these industries?
Sure. I would say humility and hard work. And also very smart, a lot of smart people. And people have stereotypes. I've always just had an open mind when I meet people. I look at who they are and I take them for who they are. When people show you who they are, that's who they are. And so I would say smart people, humility, and hard working. And that's what I've noticed the most, because like I said, I've interviewed people and I'm just sitting there learning and just listening. And so, I'd say people are real smart. They know their craft. They explain why their craft is relevant. They talk about the challenges, how to fix them. They're smart. They know what's going on. They understand. So I would say smarts, humility, and hard work.
That's a good answer. I asked that question because I challenge anybody out there listening to not want to be described in that way. Mm-hmm. Humility, hard work, and smart. I mean, hell, that's the fundamentals of success if I've ever heard it, right? And if somebody explained to somebody else, that I was that way, I'd be flattered. Right? Yeah. And if it's because I'm working in these industries that taught me those fundamentals, that helped shape that part of me, which, if there is any part of me that has, humility and that's hardworking and that is smart, I will attribute it 1,000 times to what I learned in the trades, building a business in this sector, all of those things, because it's just, there's no way you can't learn them, going through some of the stuff that we do in these industries and just being as honest as possible.
Yes.
Yeah. So last question for you, Keith. All right. We talked about it a little bit earlier. I like to talk about success and how, we all define success differently. And I'm curious for you personally, professionally, just overarching the whole thing, how do you define success, and how is what you're doing now with the skilled trades helping you to achieve that?
That's a great question. I look at success in growing on my journey. So becoming known and respected as an expert in the work that I'm doing. More importantly, making an impact on our young people and getting more people closing that skills gap, right? Because the mission of what I'm doing is to close the skills gap, to get young people paid more, and to help companies grow by finding great people to hire. So I think that for me, the vision is to create LinkedIn for the skilled trades. So when my platform is seen as the LinkedIn for the skilled trades, and it's that impactful, because I think to me, LinkedIn is very impactful. I mean, we're having a conversation because of LinkedIn. So I think that if my platform achieves that, then that is success for me. That's huge. We don't have anything like that in terms of a platform right now. So that'll be success for me.
That's awesome. I love that definition. It's very specific, and there's not a doubt in my mind that you're headed in the right direction, Keith, especially with all the good in the world that you're doing, man. I love your style. I respect it a lot. And more than anything, I appreciate you coming on the show and sharing your journey with us and what you're doing. So for those who don't know where to find you, where can they?
If they Google Skill Stadium, all of my social media will come up. If they go to the website, www.skillstadium, SKILLSTADIUM, all of my social media links are on the website. So again, just Google Skill Stadium. I have a podcast that's listed out there too. And so that's the best way to find me.
Awesome. Well, Keith, thank you again for lending me your valuable time and coming on the show to talk to my audience today.
Josh, thank you so much for having me on the show. I love the work you do. I'm a huge fan of yours and happy to support you anytime.
I appreciate it, Keith. Have a good one. All right.
You too.